Good evening, dear dreamers. Tonight we embark on a magical journey, a gentle escape from the noise of the world into a realm of stories where time slows down. Stars whisper secrets and every shadow hides a little wonder. Welcome to Grimm's most enchanting tales. A timeless bedtime storytelling session crafted for calm, comfort, and imagination. Whether you're nestled in bed, lying under soft blankets, or simply letting the day melt away, this space is yours to rest, to wander, and to dream. Over the next 3 hours, you'll be gently guided through 5 beautifully told fairy tales. Some are inspired by the brothers Grimm, others by Hans Christian Andersen, and a few may feel like they were pulled straight from a forgotten storybook resting beneath the roots of an ancient tree. These tales are not rushed. Each one unfolds slowly, allowing you to breathe, reflect, and drift deeper into the world of dreams. You'll meet a willow tree that glows under moonlight. You'll wander into a starry workshop where time itself is handcrafted. You'll follow a silver fish through the lantern-lit streams of wishes. Witness a princess who paints her dreams into reality. And finally walk through a nighttime garden where flowers murmur lullabies. Between each story, there will be gentle intermissions. These moments are meant to help you stretch, sip some warm tea, or simply relax before stepping into the next story. A soft recap halfway through will remind you of where you've been and how far you've traveled in the world of imagination. The atmosphere tonight is one of peace. You may hear the gentle rustle of forest leaves, the distant toll of a sleepy village bell, or the shimmer of stars falling across a quiet sky. Subtle sound effects and music will accompany our journey. Soft wind, owl calls, maybe a lullaby echoing from a castle tower long abandoned. These sounds are meant to soothe you, not distract you. Let them settle around you like a warm shawl. And now, as you prepare to let go of the day, I invite you to close your eyes, or leave them softly open, unfocused, and surrender to the rhythm of the tales. Let your breathing slow, your thoughts drift like dandelion seeds in the wind. There's no rush here. There's no pressure to stay awake or fall asleep. Simply listen. These stories, after all, have been passed down through centuries. They've been whispered by candlelight, written in the margins of ancient books, sung in lullabies by mothers to their children. They are ageless, and tonight they are just for you, so settle in. Take one last look around your room. Perhaps dim the lights, fluff your pillows, and let your mind step away from deadlines, devices, and daylight, because the forest is waiting. The stars are shimmering, and the first story begins under a sky full of moonlight. The Juniper Tree and the Talking Bird. Once upon a time, under the watchful eye of a crooked moon, a girl named Elna lived with a stepmother who spoke in honeyed tones by day and wore a heart of stone by night. Her house sat at the farthest edge of the village, where the path stopped and the ancient forest began. Outside that house stood a juniper tree, gnarled, thick, and older than memory. It bent toward the cottage like it listened to every whisper. And every winter, though no other tree dared bloom, the juniper bore pale blue berries that shimmered like frost-kissed pearls. Elna had no memory of her real mother. All she had was the tree and the lullaby her mother once sang, which Elna hummed each night. Beneath the juniper's sleeping shade, where truth and ashes softly fade, let sorrow turn to silver song. And what is lost return ere long. Her stepmother hated that lullaby. Old words for dead women, she'd sneer, and yet the more the stepmother hated it, the more Elna sang it quietly to herself, like a spell to keep her heart from breaking. The stepmother had a son, older than Elna, named Rurik. Rurik was cruel, not out of nature but out of mimicry, like a puppet carved from jealousy. He would trip Elna when she carried water, steal the bread off her plate, and whisper lies to their mother until Elna was punished. Yet Elna never told a lie in return. Instead, she told the truth to the juniper tree. On the coldest day of winter, when the wind sounded like wolves and the firewood was low, the stepmother sent Elna into the woods with only a sack and a warning. "Don't return unless you find something worth warming this house." Elna went barefoot with only her wool shawl, but when the sun dipped below the trees and frost clung to her lashes, she heard something. Not a wolf, not the wind, a voice, a song. A bird's song, so clear and golden it made the stars seem dull. Perched on the topmost branch of the juniper tree, a bird with feathers of copper, gold and ash stared down at her. When it sang, the branches swayed, not with wind but with memory. Elna stepped forward, and the bird spoke. Elna of the forgotten name, would you ask, or would you claim to know? Tell me the truth, and I will sing of justice, death, and buried things. I seek only warmth, Elna whispered. And truth, if it will keep me from freezing. The bird tilted its head. Then it sang, beneath the roots, beneath the snow, lies the truth you need to know. Bone to bone and ash to bark, her lullaby still sings in the dark. The ground rumbled. Snow fell from the juniper's branches. At the tree's base the soil cracked, and from it rose a tiny box no bigger than her hand. Inside, a lock of golden hair tied with a faded ribbon and a ring engraved with her mother's name. Your mother, the bird said, was murdered in this house. Poisoned with berries meant for you, Elna's breath caught. But the tree? She gave birth to me in her last breath. She sang you safe, and I've waited for your voice to awaken mine. Elna returned to the house with the box hidden beneath her shawl. She didn't speak a word to her stepmother. She simply sat by the fire and hummed the lullaby again, louder this time, clear enough that the flames seemed to sway to it. That night the bird flew to every house in the village, and with each house it sang the tale of a woman poisoned by jealousy, of a tree that bore witness, of a child meant to be silenced but who carried her mother's song. By morning, the whole village stood outside the cottage. The stepmother tried to lie. Witchcraft, she said. Birdsong and nonsense, but the bird landed on her shoulder and whispered just one verse into her ear. She went pale, then quiet, then fled. Rurik never spoke again of cruelty. In time he left the village altogether. Years passed. Elna grew into a woman of quiet strength. She never sought revenge. Instead, she tended the juniper tree and sang beneath it each night. The bird lived in its branches, and villagers came from far and wide to hear its songs of truth. They called it the Tree of Justice. But Elna called it by another name. Mother, she whispered each night, laying her head against its bark. Thank you for giving me a voice. Even when truth is buried deep, it grows toward light. Even when the world is cold, a voice can warm it. And even when a heart is broken, it can sing. The tale of the juniper tree and the talking bird has now drifted into the hush of night. The flames in the hearth have softened. The shadows dance more slowly on the walls. And if you listen very carefully, you might still hear the faintest flutter of wings above your head. A quiet chirp. A lullaby. Not all truths are spoken with loud voices. Sometimes they arrive in a whisper, in a breeze, in a song sung by someone who never forgot what love sounded like. That is the lesson Elna brought us, that courage is not only in swords or shouts, but in patience, in memory, in gentleness held even when the world offers you none. You see, fairy tales aren't always about princes or castles. Sometimes they bloom in ordinary places, in the soil, under an old tree, or in a shawl passed from mother to daughter. They remind us that even in the harshest winters of life, someone is watching, listening, waiting to help us remember who we really are. Tonight, that someone might be a bird. Tomorrow, it might be your own reflection. But the message remains: when we dare to tell our truth, the world begins to listen. When we hum the songs others tried to silence, we awaken magic. Let this be your breath now, deep and calm. Let your thoughts fall gently, like the snow that once blanketed Elna's world. Notice how your chest rises and falls, slow and easy. There is no rush here. This night was made for lingering. Perhaps you wonder where the talking bird flew next. Perhaps you wonder what became of Rurik, or whether the juniper tree still sings. Let that wondering cradle you. Let it carry you like a boat across still waters. For that is what stories do. They carry. They carry grief and joy and all the unspoken things we bury. And somehow, in the telling, they make us whole again. In the distance, another tale is preparing itself. It stirs quietly in a cottage where clocks tick louder than thunder, where time itself has grown drowsy, where a boy named Emil, with eyes like cloudy skies and hands that know how to fix anything except the past, waits. His story is not yet awake. But you, dear listener, are ready. We have wandered through sorrow and justice. We have seen what happens when a girl dares to return home not with firewood, but with truth. Now let us cross the threshold of another dream. Let us drift from one magic to the next, because in this house of tales the windows are wide open and the stars are eager to listen. Briar Rose, the Sleeping Princess. Once upon a time, hidden deep beyond the rivers of memory and the mists of men, there lay a kingdom no map remembered. Alurel it was once called, a place of warm light, silent lakes and rose bushes that bloomed only by moonlight. There, under a rare constellation, when the stars formed a circle around the North Star, a baby girl was born to the royal house. The queen, long-thought barren, cried with joy. The king, a man of books and silence, watched the stars shift and knew this child was unlike any before. They named her Lysandra, but the people, awed by the roses that unfurled the moment she first cried, whispered her name differently, Briar Rose. Because though her cheeks were soft as petals, they sensed, as the old sometimes do, that she would grow with thorns. In her christening hall of crystal chandeliers and ivy-covered pillars, noble folk gathered to bring blessings to the child, courage from the west, cleverness from the north, melody from the south, and grace from the east. Yet there was one guest no one had dared to invite, Kalia, the dream witch, older than the kingdom itself. Once a guardian of starlight and sleep, Kalia had retreated into shadows when the world grew too loud. Her silence had been mistaken for defeat. She arrived in robes of dusk and dust, her eyes two full moons. Without lifting her voice, she whispered her gift, or curse. When she touches the spindle forged from fallen time, she breathed, she shall sleep not in death, but outside of days, beneath thorn and silence until a choice is hers to make. Not one of love, but of self. The room chilled. The queen clutched her daughter. The king ordered the destruction of every spindle in the kingdom, decreeing that no wheel nor needle shall exist within Alurella. Yet time, like prophecy, leaves fragments behind. Lysandra grew as girls do, though she was no ordinary child. She chased lightning across rooftops, spoke to the birds in the courtyard like old friends, and refused to wear shoes unless strictly necessary. She was sharp-tongued with tutors and kind to kitchen mice. The queen tried to teach her to curtsy. Lysandra learned to sword fight instead. The king tried to interest her in diplomacy. She preferred astronomy and books about forgotten beasts. At night she dreamed strange dreams, of corridors made of mirrors, of rose petals falling backward, of a quiet voice humming from under the floorboards of the palace. On the eve of her 17th birthday, the sky was unusually pale and the stars seemed to flicker in uneasy rhythm. The palace bustled with celebration preparations, but Lysandra wandered past the banquet hall, past the old chapel, past the west wing. No one entered. She had always been told the west wing was sealed due to foundation rot. But as she passed, she heard it, a hum, low and lovely, like a lullaby sung by the stone itself. Drawn like a moth, she pressed her hand to the door, and it opened, though no key was turned. Inside was a long corridor lined with cobwebs and dust, thick as velvet. Her steps echoed, and the silence felt sacred. At the end, a spiral staircase of gray stone led her downward, to a room glowing faintly with blue light. There, on a dais of marble, stood the spindle. It looked like a work of art, thin, silver, and turning slowly on its own, though no hand moved it. Her breath caught. She had never seen a spinning wheel in her life, but somehow her heart knew it. It shimmered like a memory, and when she reached forward to touch it, not out of naivety but out of recognition, the air around her stilled. In an instant, the world shifted. Lysandra collapsed like a rose at twilight. Across the palace, people froze mid-laugh, mid-bite, mid-breath. The baker's fire paused its flicker. The guards slept where they stood. The sky over Al-Urel thickened with velvet clouds, and from the ground beneath the palace, vines surged, not green, but deep violet, crowned with thorns longer than daggers and roses that glowed with faint red light. They wrapped around the castle like a lover unwilling to let go, sealing it off from time itself. But Lysandra was not dead. She dreamed, and within her dream she stood in a labyrinth built not from stone, but from memory. The halls were shaped from lullabies, childhood laughter, shadows of fear, and moments too quiet to notice. She saw versions of herself in mirrors, one who had obeyed, one who had run away, one who had never touched the spindle. The dream spoke, but not in voices. It spoke in choices. 3 paths revealed themselves, a golden road lined with applause and ease, a thorny tunnel echoing with silence and sorrow, and a still river flowing upstream with a single candle afloat. She walked toward the river. Each step through the dream asked her something. Will you be who they said you were? Will you wait to be saved? Will you sleep through your own life? She said nothing and only stepped carefully into the water. The candle ahead of her flickered with her doubts. But when she sang softly, just nonsense melodies from her childhood, the flame steadied. At the end of the river stood the spindle again. But this time she did not touch it. She looked it in the eye, if such a thing could have one, and spoke clearly. You are not my end. You are my mirror, and I see now that I don't need to be awakened by anyone. I already am. With those words, the labyrinth began to dissolve. The dream peeled away. The candle flared into white light, and somewhere in the physical world, the roses trembled. Back in the tower, Lysandra's eyes opened, not with a gasp, but with quiet resolve. Her hands were steady. She stood alone, but stronger than she had ever felt. Below her, the vines began to pull back, retreating into the soil like they had merely been waiting for her word. The palace stirred. Servants blinked. The court resumed its motions as if stirred from a long nap. No one remembered the 100 years that had nearly passed. Time itself had folded neatly like a page turned carefully, and yet something had changed. The king and queen embraced her, confused by their sudden tears. The people rejoiced, though they did not know why their joy had a trembling edge, and Lysandra, now fully Briar Rose, did not tell them the details of what had happened. She only asked that the west wing be left open, that the roses be allowed to grow freely around the palace, and that the old stories not be told as rescues, but as revelations. Far beneath the palace, in a cave lined with dream root and stardust, Kalia the Dream Witch watched through her pool of smoke. She smiled, for the first time in a century. She was ready, the witch said softly, her voice barely more than a breeze. And she chose. Not all awakenings come from kisses. Some come from walking through fear. Some come from choosing not to be the story others wrote for you. Lysandra was never waiting to be saved. She was waiting to remember that she could save herself. The tale of Briar Rose has settled, like mist curling at the base of trees, like candle smoke after the flame bows low. If you close your eyes now, perhaps you can still feel the hush of that dream palace, where time folded itself like a sleeping bird and silence grew on the vines. The story's over, but its echo remains. Let that echo wrap itself around you now, gentle as a shawl. Soft as midnight, you have just returned from a place where curses were doors, where roses had teeth, and where a girl touched fate not to surrender to it, but to see it. Speak to it and walk past it. That kind of courage leaves a mark, not a loud one. A quiet golden scar. You may feel it now, somewhere in your chest, a warmth that wasn't there before. That is the gift Briar Rose leaves behind, a reminder that there is power in your own voice, even in dreams. Especially in dreams. Many have told the tale differently, of course. In many versions, she sleeps until kissed by a stranger, waking only when someone else decides she is ready to live again. But those tales miss something deeper, something older. You see, true fairy tales, the ones whispered beneath old trees and passed through firelight, don't always reward waiting. They reward waking. Briar Rose did not sleep because she was weak. She slept because it was necessary, because she had to meet herself in the place between dreams and decide who she wanted to be. And she did. Not by slaying dragons or wearing crowns, but by walking the hardest path in silence and coming back with her own name on her lips. Let us rest a moment with her story still blooming in our hearts. Let the vines curl in your imagination, not with menace but with meaning. Let the candlelight flicker beside your bed. Let your thoughts settle like the dust in the forgotten west wing, quiet now but full of truth. You are safe here. Time is gentle here. You can breathe slowly. In the hush after a tale, the world feels different. The wind sounds deeper. The stars blink more slowly. There's a strange magic in that space, where one story ends and another stirs just beyond the curtain of night. Listen closely. Do you hear it? In some forest far from here, a bell is ringing with no hand to strike it. Somewhere an owl opens its eyes for the first time in 100 years. A boy is tinkering with clocks in a shop where time sighs instead of ticking. These are not coincidences. These are invitations. The stories we tell do not live only in books or bedtime hours. They live in us, in the way we choose to speak, to wait, to walk through doors even when we are afraid of what might be behind them. When Briar Rose opened her eyes, she saw herself clearly for the first time. That kind of clarity doesn't come easily. It must be earned. And maybe, just maybe, you are earning it too, just by listening. So take a breath. Let the sleepiness wrap around your shoulders. Let your thoughts drift not backward but inward. Ask yourself, what would I find if I walked into my own labyrinth? What versions of myself are waiting in the mirrors? What songs have I forgotten to hum? Fairy tales are not meant only for children. They are meant for the child that still whispers inside us. The one who wants to believe that magic is real, that curses can be broken, that time can sleep and wake at our will. That voice still lives in you. It has never gone silent. Perhaps tonight it's humming again. The night deepens. Outside your window, the stars may be faint, but they are watching. The moon has tilted her face toward your dreams. The wind is soft, like pages turning. Something is coming. A new tale. One that begins not in a palace, but in a shop filled with ticking clocks and forgotten wishes. There's a boy there, no older than you once were, who can fix anything. Except the past, his story is waiting. Just beyond the door of this intermission, just beyond this breath. So rest, dear listener. You've wandered far already tonight. You've stood beside a cursed cradle. You've walked through a sleeping forest. You've watched a girl become more than a legend. You've watched her become herself. And now, the next candle is about to be lit, the next dream is ready to speak. Let's walk toward it, together. The Golden Bird and the Silent Garden. Once in a far-off land where the trees whispered in forgotten languages and rivers flowed like melted glass, there stood a palace no one dared to enter. It was wrapped in vines, nestled within a forest that hummed with ancient stillness and surrounded by a wall of crumbling ivory stones. The villagers who lived nearby said it had been cursed for 100 years, ever since the last empress of Velmir passed away. They said the curse had stolen something, not life, not color, but sound. Nothing inside those palace walls had made a noise in a century. No birdsong echoed, no water dripped. Not even footsteps dared break the silence, and so the palace slept in its hush. But gardens, as gardens do, kept growing, wild, fragrant, and deafeningly quiet. In the village on the forest's edge lived a boy named Nico, an apprentice gardener with a quiet soul and quiet life. He had been mute since birth, and though he had no voice, he understood the language of the earth better than anyone. He could feel the breath of flowers opening. He could sense the anger in a wilting leaf. The soil spoke to him in its warmth, the wind in how it curled around his fingertips. He did not hear like others, but he listened more deeply than any of them. People often forgot he was in the room. He did not mind. There was power in being overlooked. There was magic in the quiet. One day, as Nico tended to the roses behind the village temple, he felt something strange in the breeze. A rhythm that didn't belong, a silence that was too heavy. It pulled at him like a thread sewn into his bones. That night he dreamed of a golden bird trapped in a cage of vines. It looked at him with eyes full of stars and sorrow. It sang, but there was no sound, only the pulse of meaning. When he woke, he followed the dream. He walked beyond the edge of the known paths through tangled groves and forgotten roads until he reached the silent palace. The gate, once proud and gilded, now hung open like a mouth mid-sigh. Ivy covered the stone lions, moss blanketed the sundials, and inside, nothing stirred. Even the birds that followed him through the woods had stopped singing at the gate. As Nico stepped into the garden, a hush wrapped around him, so complete, so heavy, it felt like walking into velvet. There were no birds, no bees, no rustle of leaves. The fountains did not bubble, though water shimmered inside. Wind passed through the trees but did not whistle. He knelt beside a rosebush. The petals were flawless, but the plant trembled. Not with life, with longing. It had not heard its own rustle in 100 years. Nico stayed. He began tending the garden as if it was still alive, watering, pruning, touching every leaf with care. He sang not with voice but with hands. He let the breeze through the corridors of hedges. He let his footsteps brush the gravel paths. And though no sound came, something began to stir. One morning, near the base of the fountain, he found a feather, golden, glowing faintly even in daylight. It was warm to the touch, and when he closed his eyes, he felt a heartbeat, not his own. The feather led him to the heart of the garden, a circle of elder trees surrounding a statue of the Empress. Carved in white stone, her arms outstretched as if holding something once cradled and now lost. In the branches above her head, something shimmered. The golden bird, its feathers caught the light like polished flame. Its eyes were amber and aching. It looked down at him, not with fear, but with memory. It opened its beak and let out a song, or rather, a shape of a song. Nico felt it like thunder beneath his ribs, though no note met his ears. He bowed his head. For the first time in a century, the golden bird descended. It perched on the statue's outstretched arm and blinked at him. Then it dropped a second feather, softer than breath, into his hands. The moment he touched it, he saw a vision, a flicker of the past. The Empress, old and dying, stood in this very garden as war approached the gates. She had no army, only time left to give. And so she whispered her last wish into the body of a bird, her memories, her melodies, her grief, and released it to keep the garden from falling into the noise of grief and greed. The silence was her shield. But time, even silent time, wears thin. Nico understood. This bird carried not just silence, but sorrow. It was not a punishment. It was mourning. The garden had not been cursed. It had been protecting something fragile. A final song. The bird flew to his shoulder, and for the first time in its long life, it sang. The sound was faint, like moonlight touching water, but it carried everything: loss, love, memory, hope. The garden did not echo. It shivered. Leaves trembled. Flowers turned toward the sound. Fountains gurgled. The wind remembered its music. And far off, the palace doors creaked for the first time in 100 years. Nico stayed in the garden for 3 days. He did not sleep. He listened. The bird came each morning and offered him a new feather, each one bringing back a piece of forgotten song. The laughter of children once born in this palace. The humming of maids. The snore of old cats. Even the angry mutters of gardeners are long gone. The garden absorbed each sound like a sponge starved of rain. And then it began to whisper back. The trees began to sway again. The rose bushes sighed. The fountains laughed. The golden bird, lighter each day, grew smaller, not in size but in burden, until the final morning. The bird flew down one last time and placed its final feather in Nico's palm. Then it rested its head against his cheek and vanished in a shimmer of golden ash. The silence that remained was no longer heavy. It was holy. like the pause after music, not its absence. And when Nico stepped outside the gates to return to the village, his own heart was changed. He still could not speak with a voice. But his silence now held the sound of the garden. Wherever he walked, people quieted, not from discomfort, from reverence. He had learned something few ever do, that to truly listen is to heal. That silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is love holding its breath. Silence is not the enemy of meaning, it is the cradle that holds it. To listen without ears, to feel what goes unheard, is to understand more deeply than sound allows. Some gardens bloom in sound, others in silence, but both are songs worth tending. The night has grown deeper now. The stars outside your window have turned slightly in the sky, like pages being turned by an invisible hand. And within this quiet hour, 3 stories have already unfurled, not loudly, not with noise, but with the soft grace of a falling feather or the rustle of a dream remembering itself. Let us rest here a while, between the tales. Let us hold a lantern to what we've seen. First came the story of a juniper tree, standing still but remembering everything. A tree that held within its bark a lullaby, a lost mother, and a girl who whispered her truths into its roots. Elna, the quiet child with a quiet sorrow, showed us that justice does not always wear armor. Sometimes it wears silence. Sometimes it is born as a bird, gilded with truth and terrible clarity. And sometimes a child who refuses to lie becomes more powerful than those who shout the loudest. What was buried beneath snow, both bone and memory, returned with wings, and Elna reminded us that stories do not forget. Not truly. Not when someone remembers them aloud. Especially when that someone listens like the wind. Then we drifted gently into the thorned hush of a palace where time had paused. Where Briar Rose, Lysandra, touched the spindle not to end her tale, but to begin it. In that tale we learned that sleep can be sacred, not shameful. That pausing is not the same as surrendering. And that real awakening never comes from outside, not from kisses, nor swords, nor songs, but from the courage to meet ourselves in the dark and choose the path not of ease, but of truth. Her labyrinth of mirrors and candles was not just a dream, it was a reckoning. And when she chose the quiet river instead of the golden road, she taught us something too often forgotten. Not all curses are cruel. Some are placed upon us to give us the chance to ask, "Who am I really?" when no one is watching. Her answer was a soft one, but it rang louder than bells. And then, not long ago, we stepped into a garden that had forgotten its own voice. Not by fault, but by design. A garden sealed away in grief, where even the breeze did not dare sing, and there we met Nico, the boy with no voice but the deepest ears the world had ever known. It was he who showed us that silence is not absence. It is space. It is reverence. It is mourning. And when the golden bird, born of the last empress's breath, began to sing once more, it wasn't to break the silence, but to complete it. As petals opened and fountains laughed again, we too remembered how sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply listen, truly holy without rushing to respond. 3 stories, 3 silences, and yet, if you lean close, you will feel the thread that winds through all of them, soft as moonlight, strong as twine. Each tale began not with noise, but with a hush, with something that went unspoken, unseen, unheard, a buried truth, a forgotten gate, a lost song. And in each tale it was not the loud, the powerful, or the obvious who carried the magic forward. It was those who waited, who noticed, who felt. It was the girl who hummed a lullaby in secret, the princess who walked quietly through her own shadows, the boy who never spoke a word but taught a garden how to sing again. Perhaps, dear listener, that is why you are here too, because somewhere inside you lives the part that understands this. The part that feels the turning of stories like the turning of stars. The part that recognizes that fairy tales are not only mirrors, they are maps. And each of these maps points not toward castles or crowns, but inward. They remind us that some truths can only rise when we make space for them, that sleep is sometimes necessary to awaken something deeper, that even silence holds music, if we are still enough to hear it. So let's pause together. Let's walk slowly now. Not forward, not backward, but softly through the garden of memory. Can you feel it? The juniper tree still hums with Elna's lullaby. It listens to your heartbeat now and adds it to the rhythm of all hearts who have dared to tell the truth. Briar Rose's spindle has turned to dust, yes, but the path she walked remains. You are walking it now, choosing not what is easy, but what is real. Her river flows through you too, in dreams and doubts and the glow of self-recognition, and Nico's golden feathers. They fall even here in this quiet space between stories. Each one is a moment you've claimed for stillness. Each one is a reminder that you don't need a voice to speak magic into the world. This is your interlude, dear dreamer. This is your breath. In the ancient tradition of oral tales, this is where the storyteller looks out over the sleeping room and says, "Are you still with me? If you are, then I will tell you something secret, something soft." These three stories, the tree, the princess, the bird, they are not separate. They are reflections of the same truth told in different voices. They are pieces of a greater dream. Elna's story was about justice, not the justice of courts, but of memory, of ancestors, of things that should not have been buried. Lysandra's story was about identity, not the one assigned to us, but the one we choose when no one is watching. And Nico's story was about healing, not the kind given by others, but the kind we find in ourselves when we stop chasing sound and start holding silence, justice, identity, healing. These are not just themes, they are preparations. They are preparing you for what comes next. You see, in the final half of our storytelling journey, you will walk through deeper forests across quieter oceans, and into stories where light is hidden, not lost. Stories where choices must be made, and not all of them are easy. You will meet children who trade dreams for stars. You will meet old souls trapped in glass jars. You will meet hearts broken open, not by force, but by forgiveness. And you will not be the same, because with each tale, a feather is being placed in your hand. With each tale, a rosebush is blooming behind your ribs. With each tale, a part of you is choosing to stay awake, even as sleep draws near. So let's rest here just a bit longer. Let's thank the stories that have brought us to this moment. Thank you, Elna, for your song of hidden truth. Thank you, Lysandra, for walking your dream with courage. Thank you, Nico, for your garden of golden silence. And thank you, listener, for staying, for listening, for letting these tales enter your heart like gentle knocks on a door long unopened. When you are ready, not before, the next story will begin. But for now, let your breath be slow. Let the candle burn low. Let the hush between stories stretch like twilight across your thoughts. And know this, the stories are not over. You are still inside the dream, and the dream still has much to show you. The fisherman and his enchanted wife, once, beyond the edge of any map and far past where even the wind dared to remember names, there lived a fisherman named Rowan in a crooked cottage at the end of a cliff that bent like a question mark into the sea. He was not young and not old, not handsome in the way songs described, but he carried in his eyes the soft gray patience of someone who had spoken more to the tide than to men. His hands were worn rope, his voice was low thunder, and his only companion was the ocean, which gave and took with no explanation. Every morning he cast his nets into the foam-flecked water, and every evening he thanked the sea, whether it yielded fish or not. He lived alone not because he was unloved, but because he had loved once, long ago, and the loss had filled him like seawater in a hollow hull. The villagers said he was touched by the salt, whispered that he spoke to waves, that he laughed with the wind, and mourned with the gulls. Rowan let them believe what they liked. The sea knew him, and that was enough. But one storm-churned evening, as the sky folded itself into thunderclouds and the rocks sang with wind, Rowan cast his net in desperation before the tide could rise too high. He didn't expect anything. He rarely did. But when he pulled the net back, tangled in its silken weight was a woman, not drowned, not gasping, but perfectly still, as though carved from the breath of the sea itself. Her hair was dark as kelp, her skin pale with a strange moonlit shimmer, and though she was soaked to the bone, her eyes were open and watching him without fear. Rowan stumbled back, but the woman rose from the net like mist and stepped barefoot onto the wet stones. She said nothing but reached up and touched his face gently, as if confirming he was real. That night they said no words. He lit the fire. She sat beside it. She didn't shiver. He made tea. She didn't drink. When he finally dared to ask, "What are you?" she only smiled and replied, not with voice, but with something deeper, a presence in his mind like a forgotten song. "I was waiting for someone who wouldn't ask me to speak before listening. From that moment on, she stayed." He called her Mira, though she never confirmed the name. She wore his clothes without shame, stood on the cliffs without blinking, and listened to the waves like they were old friends telling secrets. She did not age. She did not bleed. She didn't fear storms. And she never slept, only rested with eyes open, humming quietly in a language he couldn't place. Still, she cleaned fish with him, mended nets with startling skill, and when he sighed, she placed a hand over his chest, as if reminding his heart to beat. Days turned into weeks, and Rowan began to smile again. He forgot the ache in his bones. His garden grew brighter. His boat stopped creaking. Even the sea seemed gentler. The villagers, wary at first, grew curious, especially the old priestess who sold herbs and watched tides. "You brought the sea into your home," she told Rowan one day. "She walks like foam and smells like storms. You may find joy, but not peace." Rowan didn't understand or pretended not to. He didn't care what Mira was. She was here, and in her presence the silence he had worn like armor began to crack. But strange things began to happen, quietly at first. The tide began shifting out of season. Nets returned full of silver fish that shimmered oddly, their scales whispering like leaves. Once Rowan caught a creature with 3 eyes and a mouth that hummed lullabies. The moon rose twice in 1 week. Children began dreaming of a woman singing from the cliffs. And Mira began to change. At night she walked to the sea and stood ankle deep, whispering in that same unknown language. Rowan followed once, silently, and watched as the water lit up around her feet, glowing like starlight beneath the waves. She wept, though her face remained calm. When he touched her shoulder, she turned and said aloud, for the first and only time, "The sea does not forget what it gives away." He should have asked more. But love makes us foolish, and Rowan, who had lived most of his life in silence, feared that speaking would break the spell. He chose to believe she was a blessing, an answered prayer. He began carving a comb for her, shaped from driftwood and polished coral, etched with gulls and waves, though he never told her why. "For your hair," he said softly one evening, handing it to her. "To keep the wind from stealing it." She took it and for the first time looked startled, not angry, not sad, just suddenly distant. "This," she said, holding it gently, "is the shape of a promise. And promises, Rowan, have weight." That night the sea rose higher than it had in a century. It kissed the steps of their home, and in the morning Mira was gone. Rowan searched for her until his hands bled. He called her name, though she'd never truly given him one. He asked the birds. He asked the wind. He asked the sea. For 3 days he neither ate nor slept. Then, on the 3rd morning, the tide brought back the comb, resting on the shore, dry and warm, wrapped in seaweed and song. He held it like an anchor. That night she returned, dripping wet but radiant, eyes brighter than before. "There is something I must show you," she said. He followed her down the cliffs, past the reef no boat dared cross, to a cave he had never seen. Inside was a pool of water that shimmered with memories, not reflections. In it he saw a world beneath the sea, a kingdom of coral towers, whalebone bridges, and glowing gardens where voices drifted like bubbles. Mira stood by his side, her feet barely touching the ground. "This is where I am from," she whispered. "I was a guardian of song, a keeper of silence. Long ago I chose to leave, to understand the weight of love above the waves. But love is never weightless. Rowan said nothing. He feared that if he blinked, she'd vanish again. She handed him the comb. This binds me here. As long as you keep it, I will remain. But the sea calls me back. It always has. He looked at her and knew the truth. That she was never meant to be his. That she had come to learn, and so had he. Will you go if I return it? He asked. She nodded. Will you suffer if I don't? She nodded again. Rowan turned toward the waves. The sky above was violet with stars. He stepped into the water, held the comb high and whispered a thank you, not with words but with memory. Then he let it go. The sea accepted it like an old friend, pulling it under with no splash, no sound. Mira kissed his cheek. Her tears for the first time felt human. You are the only one who listened, she said. And for that the sea will always remember you. She disappeared beneath the surface. The tide ebbed. The garden grew quiet. Rowan returned to his cottage alone. But the sea was never silent again. Love is not possession. It is permission. To hold someone is one thing. To let them be free is another. True love listens, and sometimes it releases, and when it does, the sea sings forever in return. The 12 Dancing Princesses. Once, in a kingdom surrounded by still lakes and whispering forests, there stood an old palace of white stone and silver-roofed towers that shimmered beneath the stars like the surface of water, untouched and watchful. In this palace lived a king who had 12 daughters, each more graceful than the last, and all beloved not only for their beauty, but for their gentleness, their silence, and the strange sadness that seemed to follow them like perfume no one could name. Though each night they were locked in their rooms beneath moonlight and velvet curtains. By morning their slippers were worn through, thin and torn as if they had danced till dawn, and yet none knew where, or how, or why. The king, troubled, offered a reward. Any man who could uncover their secret would have his choice of a princess to wed and inherit a piece of the realm, but those who failed would leave the palace with memory washed from them like ink from rain. One by one, noblemen came and failed, lulled to sleep before midnight, waking with fog behind their eyes and nothing in their hands but ruined shoes and dreams they couldn't hold. The kingdom watched. The daughters smiled softly. The king grew older and quieter. Then, one spring dusk, a boy named Aaron arrived. Not a soldier. Not a prince, but the apprentice to the palace gardener, with soil beneath his nails and quiet in his step, who'd spent years tending roses without once asking for names. He had heard the tale, of course. Everyone had. But Aaron did not come seeking reward. He came because he had seen the youngest princess, Aaliyah, kneeling once in the garden after rain, cupping a broken daffodil as if it were a wounded bird, whispering something to it. And in that moment, he had seen the way sorrow can sit beside beauty without trembling. That night he sat outside their chamber door with his back to the wall and a blanket at his feet, saying nothing, waiting for sleep to take him, as it had taken all others. But sleep did not come. Instead, at the hour when silence deepens and even the moon holds its breath, he heard laughter, faint and musical, like a harp string plucked beneath water. When he peered through the keyhole, he saw the eldest sister, Mira, lift a rug from the floor and reveal a staircase that shimmered like poured light, spiraling downward into darkness that pulsed like a dream. One by one, the princesses took cloaks of silver-threaded silk and slipped away into the hidden passage, their feet light, their eyes distant. Aaron waited until the last hem vanished, then followed, not with boots but barefoot, carrying nothing but a sprig of rosemary from the garden tucked behind his ear. The stairs did not creak. The air smelled of distant rain and old music. As he descended, the stone walls shifted to glass, and the steps began to glow. At the bottom he found a forest unlike any above, one where the leaves were spun gold, the trunks were pearl, and the path was lit with lanterns that floated unheld. The sisters walked ahead, none speaking, each moving as if guided by memory, not sight. Aaron followed at a distance, careful not to disturb the hush that surrounded them like a charm. Soon they reached a silver lake where 12 boats waited, each shaped like a swan, and within each sat a prince carved from moonlight and sorrow, eyes kind but hollow. The sisters stepped into the boats, and the princes rowed them across, not speaking, not smiling, but bowing their heads to the rhythm of unseen music. On the other side, beyond a gate of coral and bone, stood a palace built of light itself. All its windows flickered like fireflies, and its towers reached not into sky, but into stars. Inside, a ballroom stretched farther than vision. Here the sisters danced, not in joy nor in sorrow, but in something between. They danced as if remembering, as if forgetting. They danced like girls who held secrets they could never tell. And Aaron, hidden behind a column, watched with awe and something else. Not desire, not jealousy, but longing to understand. He stayed for 3 nights, hiding, watching. Each morning the sisters returned with lips sealed and slippers frayed, and Aaron returned to his bed before the dawn could betray him. On the 4th day he spoke to Aaliyah in the garden. He did not ask her about the dancing. He asked instead why she always left a bowl of water beneath the rose arbor. She looked at him, surprised, then smiled, not with her mouth but with her whole face. "Because they are thirsty," she said. "Even petals that seem closed need something to bloom inside." And in that answer, Aaron knew more than any question could reveal. That night, instead of following, he left 12 notes on the sisters' pillows. Each one said only this: "I see you. I do not need to take what you do not wish to give." And when the king summoned him the next day, asking whether he had learned the truth, Aaron bowed and said, "Yes, but it is not mine to tell." The king frowned. "Then you forfeit your reward." Aaron nodded. "I never asked for one." He left the palace that morning with a satchel of seeds and his hands empty, but his heart full of something golden and quiet. Days passed, then weeks, and one dusk as he walked by the river near the palace he found a shoe, delicate, torn, and still warm from dancing. When he looked up, Aaliyah stood beneath the trees, barefoot, her hair unbound, her eyes gentle. "We do not dance anymore," she said softly, "not because the magic is broken, but because someone finally listened." And together they stood in silence, letting the wind braid their breaths into something that could never be unraveled. Some secrets are not meant to be solved. Some mysteries do not want answers, only kindness. To witness without taking, to love without claiming, to understand without unraveling, this is the deepest form of respect. And sometimes it is what allows the dance to finally end in peace. Now the final candle has flickered low. The stories have been told. The spell of the night has stretched itself across your heart like a soft blanket, stitched with wonder, lullabies, and the memory of golden forests and dancing daughters. You've traveled far tonight, across silent gardens and moonlit towers, into rooms where clocks breathe and princesses vanish, through oceans that hold their breath and trees that speak not in words but in echoes. 5 stories. 5 dreams wrapped in fairy dust and old magic. And yet, it all began with a single hush. We began in the quiet, not of fear, but of listening. In the soft rhythm of the juniper tree's lullaby, where a girl named Elna spoke her truth not through noise, but through a voice remembered by branches and birds. She taught us that even buried stories can grow again, if someone dares to hum them beneath the snow. Then we wandered into the thorned dreams of Briar Rose, not to wake her with kisses, but to walk beside her as she chose her path through shadow and riverlight. Her tale wasn't of being rescued, but of returning, not to a world outside, but to herself. Because sometimes the deepest awakening is the one we give ourselves. Then we heard the silence of a kingdom that forgot its own song, until Nico, a boy without a voice, came not to fix the quiet, but to honor it. In that still garden, a golden bird remembered how to sing again. And so did we. From there we sailed with Rowan, the fisherman who fell in love with a mystery shaped like a woman and carved from tide. His enchanted wife reminded us that love is not about keeping, it is about freeing. That the sea returns what we respect and takes what we cling to, and finally we danced one last time with 12 princesses, each one barefoot on a staircase made of stars. We did not chase them to steal their secret, but followed gently to witness it. To bow not with questions but with reverence. To understand that not all mysteries are problems, when some are poems, and so here we are, at the end of our 3-hour journey. And yet, not at the end at all, because the truth is, fairy tales do not end. They wait, they rest beside your bed like old friends. They bloom again when you blink up at the stars and feel something in your chest that has no name. They live in the way you pause before speaking, in the way you listen to a breeze, in the way you hold space for others' dreams, not to fix them, but to witness them. So before we close the book, let me ask you softly, where are you right now? Are you beneath a blanket, eyes fluttering, somewhere in the quiet stillness of your home? Are you curled on a couch in the soft blue hours with the hum of a distant city outside? Are you in a little room where the moonlight kisses the wall, your phone glowing beside you like a lantern? Have you been here for minutes or hours? Has time slowed like it did for Briar Rose? Has it melted like the thorns around her palace? Have you drifted already just a little? Then rest now wherever you are, because this night belongs to you. The garden remembers you. The sea is still singing your name in its waves. The staircase of stars still waits for you to return. In dreams. Close your eyes. Let the words settle inside your chest like the final falling leaves of a bedtime wind. You have walked beside birds and princesses and trees older than memory. You have listened, and in doing so, you've kept the magic alive. Thank you for sharing this journey as the stars blink softly above. May these stories guide your dreams, may they whisper to your heart in the language only sleep can understand. And may they remind you always you are the listener. And that is where all stories begin. Good night.